bragging in part because it's a way, number one, that he can put some onus on Congress for being non-cooperative. It's a way in which he responds to the public who want responsiveness, who want things done, and said, we don't always have to go through Congress to do this. We can get things done, and we can get people, especially when he brings interest groups on both sides in to make a deal. We can get this done without Congress. And so I think the bragging is both to say, see, I'm an effective president and I can get things done, and we don't just have to use Congress, and also a way of legitimizing further use of executive authority, saying to the American public, you want responsiveness. We can get people of goodwill to get together and resolve things, and we have some existing authority to do that. And we can't always wait around for Congress to pass new laws, especially when Congress isn't willing to cooperate. The Republicans are saying the president's abusing authority. The president's saying, look, I've got various interest groups and people, and you want something done, and I'm getting it done, and I have existing authority to do that. And I'm willing to work with Congress if Congress will work with me. But that's too costly, and when we can't do that, boy, look what we can do without Congress. This is not just Barack Obama. This is George W. Bush. This is Bill Clinton. This is George Herbert Walker Bush. This is Ronald Reagan. You know, presidents have an awful lot of authority to do things. Executive branch has an awful lot of authority. We've passed a lot of laws increasing the role of the federal government. And in doing so, Congress has given a lot of authority to the executive branch to carry out and execute those laws. What you have to realize is that since World War II, Congress has passed all sorts of legislation, and the enactment of that legislation and the implementation of that legislation is in the hands of the executive branch. The president, cabinet officials, sub-cabinet officials, people designated in legislation to do something, right? And how that is carried out is often imprecise or vague, or because people are uncertain as to how it will work, left to the executive branch authority to do it. And the executive can then use that authority. So this is a very different situation than Harry Truman criticizing the do-nothing 80th Congress, which was a Republican-controlled Congress, and saying, you know, they're just stopping everything I want to do, and then campaigned against that Congress. Because Harry Truman had far less authority in terms of executive authority, because the federal government, national government, had less authority. Think of all the areas in which Congress has legislated and in which the national government now is active that it wasn't active in 1947 and 48. It's just amazing. So, you know, it's not just, you know, you can think of aid to education, you can think of healthcare, you can think of civil rights, you can think of all sorts of things in regulating and managing the economy. There are all sorts of areas of foreign policy. There are all sorts of areas where commerce has grown from being intrastate commerce to being interstate commerce, where the federal government has a role now. So there's lots of authority given to the president or given to various cabinet or agency officials to do things. So very simply, another way of looking at it is the Reagan administration's treatment of affirmative action through the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department would be very different than the Obama administration's treatment of affirmative action through the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. It's how much effort are you going to put into this enforcement, for example? You know, you have this authority. You know, how are you going to use your resources? How is EPA going to spend its resources in a Reagan or a Bush administration versus a Clinton or Obama administration? It's going to be different, you know, and that's because there is a difference in the executive preferences and priorities. But one of the problems of challenging in the courts is, one, it's time consuming, and two, it's costly, and three, you have to have standing to challenge, and four, the courts very often, especially when we're talking about the use of federal regulations, the courts almost always side with the executive branch. There are lots of people who think there's a pendulum here, and that the executive branch gets power, and then Congress sees that executive has overstepped its bounds and pulled things back, and then Congress gets too much power, and these people are more willing to give power to the executive branch. So it's like a nice sine curve, right? A pendulum swinging back and forth, and we don't have anything to worry about. My concern is that over the last 130 years, we've seen this pendulum, but each time the swing toward executive authority goes greater. It swings up higher, and each time there's a pullback, it's not quite as far back.